Welcome everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Geektopia. I'm your host, Barry. This is actually the very first episode in what is planned to be an ongoing series where we talk about all things in the world of geekdom. Now, last weekend there was actually a virtual event. Obviously Comic-Con was cancelled for obvious reasons, so DC had actually announced that there was going to be a 24-hour virtual event in which they make a lot of big movie announcements, etc. A Wonder Woman 84 panel, our first look at the Suicide Squad, which is due for release next year. A few other films, and of course the one that I'm most looking forward to, The Batman, which was actually the last panel of the night. Now, The Batman is a movie that I'm seriously excited for. This is hands down my most anticipated film within the next few years. It's actually scheduled for release next October. Originally it was supposed to be getting a summer release next year, but it's actually been put back by a few months. Now, this movie was actually announced a few years back. This movie has been in development for what seems like eternity. There's been so much backstage drama going on at Warner Brothers, because originally, of course, Ben Affleck was going to be the Batman. He was going to be reprising his role from Justice League, which, of course, that movie was a big disappointment and a massive underperformance at the box office. And then, of course, he not only was he going to be Batman, he was actually going to be directing the movie. Then, of course, it actually came out that he wasn't going to be directing the film anymore, but he was still going to be Batman. But then, of course, that is alas no more. I'm still disheartened, actually, that we never actually got a solo Batfleck film. I would have liked to have seen a solo Batman film, a solo Batfleck film. Just the problem is, I think with BVS, ultimately, that film was rushed. I really do firmly believe that Batfleck should have actually had his own solo film prior to BVS. Possibly even a Man of Steel 2, that really there should have been a bigger build-up leading to the events of Batman v Superman. But of course, Batman v Superman, it happened. And essentially, it wasn't just a Batman and Superman film. It was really kind of there to lay the groundwork for the Justice League as well, which came out just over a year and a half after it. So, yeah, with this movie, obviously Ben Affleck pulled out, both from directing duties and as Batman, and eventually Matt Reeves came on board. A director that I'm very excited for the fact of him being at the helm of this movie. He's proved himself to be a really efficient director, directing two great films like Dawn of the Apes and War of the Apes, which, like I said, were two very good films. He's a good, cohesive storyteller. Both of them films had a great sense of character development, and he's one of them directors that really seems to have a knack for balancing great visuals with good storytelling. And having seen him talk about this film at Fandom, he's clearly very passionate about the character of Batman. And that's what we really need. We really need someone that has that drive, that really does have that level of enthusiasm for the character. Matt Reeves seems to have a very astute knowledge in the world of Batman. And you can just see the enthusiasm, you can see the passion when he's actually talking about this movie. Now, I'm a little disheartened still because I would have liked to have seen the Batfleck solo film. Deathstroke was actually to be the villain in that movie, which I was really excited at seeing Deathstroke actually make his big screen debut. Of course, Deathstroke did actually appear in the post-credit scene to Justice League, which was actually better than the movie itself, I'd say. Justice League was a huge disappointment, but saving that for another podcast. Obviously, we are getting the Snyder Cut next year. We should be getting the film that we should have had back at the end of 2017. And I'm very much looking forward to that. So, yeah, seeing Deathstroke on the big screen would have been great. Deathstroke's one of the few characters in DC that can actually go toe-to-toe with a Batman. So I think there was certainly a lot of potential there to have, some great action set pieces, etc. Matt Reeves took over, and this is what I'm really excited for, is that Matt Reeves has actually told us that we're in store for a very detective-driven story with a very noir style to it that's really going to kind of get to the core of Batman and kind of explore the soul of Bruce Wayne. Because, you know, for anyone that's a Batman fan and reads the comics, we know that, you know, he has one of the greatest minds in all of comics. You know, he's widely dubbed as being the world's greatest detective. Now, unfortunately, we've never really got to see much of them detective skills on the big screen before. But from what I can tell, at its core, this film's going to be very much a detective story. Obviously, there's going to be action set pieces. It's Batman, you know, it goes without saying. But yeah, this is going to be a very detective-driven story. Now, of course, you know, the big question on everyone's lips as soon as Matt Reeves was announced and, you know, Ben Affleck pulled out was, who's going to be the Batman? And so many names were thrown out there online. So many people. Nicholas Hoult. Jake Gyllenhaal. Even Jake Gyllenhaal's name was actually announced on a few occasions. And of course, Robert Pattinson's name. Robert Pattinson's name come up a few times. And, you know, Robert Pattinson is a solid actor. You know, unfortunately, a lot of people just kind of know him as the Twilight guy. But certainly over the last 5 or 6 years, Robert Pattinson has actually proved himself to be a solid actor. He's a guy with some real acting chops, and I don't feel like he gets enough credit. Now, I'll admit, I was kind of struggling to still, as much as I like Robert Pattinson as an actor, I was still kind of struggling to envision him as Batman. But it seems that nearly every actor that's ever been cast as Batman before has been under scrutiny. You know, look back at Michael Keaton, you know, with 1989's Tim Burton's Batman movie. Very few people out there actually envisioned Michael Keaton playing the role of Batman. You know, he was traditionally more of a comedy actor. He starred in Beetlejuice the year before. Now, if you said to anyone, look at Beetlejuice, the guy that's playing Beetlejuice is actually going to go on to be the next Batman, you would have said, look, you need to be sectioned. There was actually a petition to try and get him removed off the film. But Michael Keaton did a great job. He did a great job in them 2 films. You know, Ben Affleck, I'll be honest, I was a supporter of Ben Affleck. I actually thought it potentially was very good casting. Now, I know there was probably about 85 to 90% of the world that was against that casting. But the very moment that, the very first image of Ben Affleck in the cape and cowl, as soon as I saw it, I thought to myself, that's Batman. I actually thought that Ben Affleck made a good Batman. Unfortunately, I don't think that he necessarily had the best material to work with. But he was certainly the most physically imposing Batman that we had, you know, being 6'2.5", and obviously he did bulk up for the role too. Affleck was a physical presence. Keaton wasn't. Keaton, I believe, is only 5'9", 5'9.5". Keaton never really had that physical presence, but you know what? He did a great job. The one and only thing that was going against him was his physical stature, which is of no fault of his own, but he did a great job. I firmly believe that you don't necessarily need a really physically intimidating Batman. I think Michael Keaton, in a way, has kind of proved that. Yeah, with Robert Pattinson's casting, I was very much on the fence, even though I am a Robert Pattinson fan. But having seen the trailer, which I'm going to get into very shortly, I have a lot of faith. I have a lot of faith in Pattinson in this role. Now, of course, Zoe Kravitz, who I'll readily admit, she's an actor that I'm not overly familiar with. I only really know her for being Lenny Kravitz's daughter. And of course, she's the stepdaughter of Jason Momoa, aka Aquaman. I've heard that she's great in, I believe the show is called Pretty Little Liars, in which she stars alongside, you know, some top-class talent in Meryl Streep and Nicole Kidman. And she really kind of holds her own in that show. Now, as I've said, I'm not really familiar with her as an actor, but from what I've seen, because Catwoman is actually my favourite female character in all of DC. She's a character that I love. Michelle Pfeiffer did a great job in '92's Batman Returns. We're not going to talk about the 2004 film starring Halle Berry, which I'd actually say is a strong contender for worst comic book movie of all time. Catwoman is a character that I love. I love the dynamics between her and Batman. Her and Batman have this very complex relationship, kind of an on and off relationship between the two. She's a character that walks a very fine line between good and bad. Technically speaking, she's an antagonist because she actually, she is a jewel thief, she is a cat burglar, she commits criminal acts. But at the same time, she also becomes a valuable ally to Batman over the years. And it's this constant on and off battle between the two that I love. Now, again, going into the trailer, which I am going to talk about shortly, I'm liking the look of Zoe Kravitz. And from what I've been told, as I say, apparently she's a solid actor. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with Catwoman in this film. We've also got, of course, Jeffrey Wright. Again, solid actor, playing the role of Jim Gordon. Jim Gordon is a great character, and I think his friendship, relationship, is just one of the greatest in all the comics. They very much have a mutual respect for each other. They form a close alliance. We had Gary Oldman in the Dark Knight trilogy, which Gary Oldman I think did a great job. I sometimes don't feel like he gets quite enough credit for that role in that trilogy. Jeffrey Wright is a very solid actor, great in Westworld. He's obviously great as Felix Leiter in the Daniel Craig Bond movies. Admittedly, I've not actually seen him in much else, but I was perfectly happy with the casting. And I'm really hoping for that dynamic to be in this first film, because obviously this Batman movie is actually planned in being the first film in a whole new trilogy, which Matt Reeves actually plans on directing all three films. Now, obviously, we're going to have to see how well this film fares first, box office wise, but I certainly think there's a lot of potential here. Batman is such an iconic character. It's obviously been, the last solo Batman film was The Dark Knight Rises, way back in 2012. This is a film that has been in development for years now. I think there's a lot of anticipation around this movie. And yeah, from what I've seen in the trailers, I'm really hoping that they do manage to get that dynamic between Gordon and between Batman. That whole kind of, one of the great things for me with Batman and Gordon is that whole kind of, he arrives on the scene very often at a murder scene. Gordon talks to him, he turns around, he turns back, Batman's gone. It's very much become a staple of the interaction between them two characters. Now, we've got Paul Dano. Paul Dano, I was very excited at the casting of this guy. Paul Dano is a terrific actor, a fantastic actor that probably doesn't get enough work. He's, from what I've seen him in, he was in Prisoners with Jake Gyllenhaal and, I remembered it first time there, and Hugh Jackman. Very good thriller. He was also in There Will Be Blood alongside Daniel Day-Lewis, who is just one of the greatest actors in Hollywood, if not one of the greatest actors of all time. And yet, Dano actually held his own in that movie alongside Daniel Day-Lewis, and how he didn't get Oscar nominated for that, I really don't know. So I was really excited. I'm really excited to see what Dano really brings to the role. The Riddler is one of my favourite Batman villains. He's certainly one of the most well-known and iconic. Obviously, we had the Jim Carrey version back in '95 in Batman Forever, which, was Jim Carrey was perfect for the film that he was in. Because Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever was kind of harking back to the days of 60s Batman. It was a lot more colourful, more cheesy than the two films that Burton had done. And Jim Carrey's Riddler perfectly fit the format, the tone of the film that he was in. Because Jim Carrey was very much kind of at the peak of his career at that point as well. But I'm looking forward to seeing a darker take on the Riddler. And going by the trailer, we can certainly expect a much darker iteration of the character. I think that the Arkham games have actually done a great job with the character. If there's one complaint, I think there's too many Riddler challenges in the Arkham series as a whole. But overall, I think the games did a good job. And from what I can tell, this movie, The Batman's going to clearly take some inspiration here. I think from Batman Year One, which is widely regarded as being one of the best Batman stories ever told by Frank Miller, who also did The Dark Knight Returns, and of course Batman Zero Year, which was by Scott Snyder, which is one of the best Batman stories, again, in years, following the Court of Owls, part of the New 52, and the Riddler was actually the big villain in that story. So I'm certainly expecting, because what I like about the Riddler is that he's a villain that very much challenges Batman in an intellectual capacity. You've got villains like, let's say, Deathstroke and Bane who challenge Batman physically. The Riddler, what I love about the Riddler is that it really does become a requirement for Batman to really use his brain to actually take down the Riddler. And I think Paul Dano is going to do a great job. And going by the trailer, we don't actually get a good glimpse of him. He is actually masked, but he even kind of looks like Edward Nygma. He's just got that look. He's got that look to him. We've also got Colin Farrell as Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin. Of course, again, one of Batman's most well-known and iconic villains. This is the one piece to casting that I was completely unsure of. Now, I like Colin Farrell, but Oswald Cobblepot, I thought to myself, this is atrocious casting. What are they doing here? Obviously, I could only summarise that they're clearly trying to give us a completely new iteration of the character, a version that we've never seen before. Oswald Cobblepot is 4'10", Colin Farrell's 5'10", a whole foot taller. Now, I'm not saying that it's a complete write-off because of the height difference, because, at the end of the day, Wolverine is only 5'3" in the comics. Hugh Jackman's around 6'2". He's almost a foot taller than the character. And he did a great job. Hugh Jackman did a great job as Wolverine. But of course, there was a bit of a public outcry when Hugh Jackman was cast as Wolverine. But having watched the trailer, I was trying to keep an eye out for Colin Farrell and I couldn't find him. And then I come to realise that he's actually in the trailer, but he's almost unrecognisable. Now, I'm going to assume it's prosthetics and not CG or a combination of the two, but it's incredible at the transformation. He does actually appear in the trailer and I couldn't even tell that was Colin Farrell. I thought by casting someone that's a whole foot taller than Cobblepot, you're kind of destroying the very essence of the character. Because Oswald Cobblepot is a character that very much has kind of a Napoleon complex. What he lacks in stature, he makes up for with, the big top hat, the large umbrella, etc. Obviously, he's a mob boss. He has a lot of control in Gotham. But the prosthetics look amazing from what I've seen of Colin Farrell. Like I said, I couldn't recognise him. And from what I know, this is kind of the early days of Cobblepot. He doesn't actually like being called the Penguin. So I like the fact that they're actually keeping this film very grounded as well. And going back to the trailer, it looks very dark and gritty, which is what I'd expect. To me, that's the Batman I want. A dark, gritty Gotham. Like I said, the Riddler seems to be a much darker take on the Riddler. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this very kind of detective story aspect of the film that really does kind of explore Bruce Wayne, because Bruce Wayne, from what I know, it's only his second year as Batman in this movie. He's still trying to find solid footing, so I'd imagine this film might not be heavily gadget laden. He'll have the grappling hook, he'll have batarangs maybe, etc. And that kind of brings me on to the Batmobile, that some people are saying it looks nothing like the Batmobile, etc. You've got to remember, this is Bruce Wayne becoming the Batman. I mean, he is the Batman, but at this point in his career, He's only been in Gotham for a short while. There's people that don't even believe the Batman is real. Okay, he's kind of this almost urban myth, if you will. And with the Batmobile, it looks like a souped up muscle car, and I'm liking the look of it. I'm liking the simplicity of it. And obviously, if we get further sequels and this does end up becoming a trilogy, I'm sure we're going to get an upgraded Batmobile. I think this film is in very good hands. I think Matt Reeves knows what he's doing. I think this is one of the reasons this film took so long because obviously Ben Affleck actually wrote the script. And as soon as Matt Reeves come on board, Matt Reeves actually basically, in a nice way, kind of threw the script away and decided to write an entirely new script. And I think that, hopefully it's going to pay off. This is a film that Batman fans have waited years for. And onto the trailer. Forget John Turturro is in the film as well as Carmine Falcone, the mob boss, one of the very first criminals that Batman ever actually took on. Carmine Falcone was obviously played by Tom Wilkinson in Batman Begins. So again, it kind of goes. I like that fact that Batman is actually taking on some of the kind of the very grounded kind of mobsters in this movie. And then, of course, if this does end up becoming a trilogy, I would certainly expect the likes of maybe Harvey Dent, Two-Face, the Joker maybe at some point, but I don't think they should put too many eggs into one basket at this point. Don't cram too many characters, too many villains into this one film, otherwise it runs the risk of becoming bloated. So with this film, a whole new script was written. Obviously the film has officially started production. I wasn't expecting a trailer so soon, I'll have to admit. I was expecting some screenshots. I was certainly expecting some official screenshots of the Batsuit, Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman, maybe Paul Dano's Riddler, and we actually got a teaser trailer on Saturday. And by God, it did not disappoint. With this teaser trailer, it's kind of everything I wanted to see. Now, bearing in mind, only 25% of the film has actually been shot, which is why I wasn't expecting a teaser trailer, so it was a nice surprise. And yeah, I'm loving the look of Robert Pattinson. As I said before, I don't think you've got to be this huge guy to play Batman. As I said, Michael Keaton certainly wasn't. And admittedly, there's only one line in the teaser trailer from Batman, and it's where he basically lays into a thug, kicks the hell out of him and says, "I'm vengeance," and it sounds great. I mean, obviously, I can't judge the performance just on this one line and the bits of footage that we've seen so far, but we get a glimpse of Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman, who's clearly not actually wearing the full, like with Robert Pattinson's Batman. I'm actually expecting her suit to actually upgrade probably during the course of this movie. She's not actually wearing the traditional Catwoman suit you'd expect. She's kind of wearing a balaclava over the top. We don't actually get a great look at Paul Dano's Riddler. He's masked. Jim Gordon, yep. Looks great, and obviously he's there in a scene, presumably the Riddler's victim. Batman arrives on the scene. There's a puzzle that's been left for him, and it really does make callbacks to the comic books. I mean, the thing is, Matt Reeves has actually said that he really wants to put his own stamp on the Batman, but at the same time he knows that he really does have to respect all of the elements that the character is renowned for, the elements that the fans have come to love. We get a good glimpse of the Batmobile in the trailer. We see Batman using a grappling hook. The music is perfectly fitting. I believe it's actually a Nirvana song that is actually used, and as teaser trailers go, it's a great teaser trailer, and the most important thing is it doesn't show too much. Now, obviously, we're going to be getting some more trailers down the line, etc. A common criticism for me is they often show too much in a lot of trailers nowadays. So I'm actually going to try and avoid the trailers in the future. As excited as I am to see this film, I don't want to end up feeling like I've seen 2/3 of the movie before I go watching it. I think they show too much in the BVS trailer as well. Don't get me wrong, I liked BVS. At the same time, I was massively disappointed. It did feel like it was a bit of a missed opportunity, etc. But there was still a lot in that film that I did actually appreciate. You know, the great visuals, the philosophical storytelling. It just wasn't as executed as well as it could have been. I still can't believe that they actually showed Doomsday in the BVS trailer. I really can't believe they actually revealed him, because, to be honest, I don't think a lot of people actually saw Doomsday coming. But yeah, it was a great teaser trailer, and I just liked for 10-15 minutes or so just hearing Matt Reeves talk about this film, because this is very much a passion project for him. Obviously, this was going to be Ben Affleck's film, and part of me kind of thinks, you know, what if? But at the same time, I want to see a detective-driven Batman story. I want to see Batman using his mind on the big screen, which, like I said, we've never really got to see much of that before. I'm a huge fan of the Batman the Animated Series, which obviously first aired in '92. One of the best cartoons of all time. And you could say almost the perfect representation of Batman. You know, Kevin Conroy has become Batman. And Mark Hamill, obviously, has become almost immortalised as the Joker. He's fantastic as the Joker. So I think all in all, The Batman is a film that, if you're a Batman fan, I think there's a lot to be excited for here. I think you've got a director that's very enthusiastic and passionate about this film. I think one of the reasons it's taken so long is that he doesn't just want to rush it. He wants to get this script as perfect as he can. I think you've got great casting. I think Robert Pattinson's going to be great. I really do. I think he receives a lot of unfair criticism from a lot of people that probably, admittedly, haven't really seen many of his films. You know, he was great in Good Time, he was great in High Life, and he was fantastic in the quite recently released psychological horror film, which was The Lighthouse, alongside Willem Dafoe, which they were both great in. He's a very versatile, he's quite a chameleon of an actor, and I've got a lot of hope for him. And from what I've heard of Zoe Kravitz, and from what I've seen of Zoe Kravitz, I think she certainly has the potential to be a good Catwoman too. Now, you know, at the end of the day, there's no one iteration of one character. You know, everyone has their own takes on different characters. This is probably going to be somewhat different to Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman and Anne Hathaway's Catwoman. You know, but I'm all for seeing different iterations of characters. You know, these characters, Batman has been around for nearly 81 years. You know, I love Keaton. I liked Affleck's. I didn't actually love Christian Bale's. I liked Christian Bale, and Christian Bale is an actor that I really like. But at the same time, what kind of put me off a little at times. Now, don't get me wrong, the Dark Knight trilogy is a great trilogy. You know, I think certainly Batman Begins and The Dark Knight are two great films. I don't think The Dark Knight Rises quite lives up to the first two. Still a good film, but it doesn't quite reach the heights. Is that with Christian Bale's Batman, I didn't like the voice. I didn't like that. It felt too forced for me at times. It sounded like a throat cancer voice. You know, I don't want to sound harsh or anything, but it just sounded, too forced. And I never actually saw Christian Bale as that much of a physical presence either. Now, it's not an absolute necessity, of course, but Christopher Nolan's a great filmmaker. I actually think he's one of the more consistent filmmakers out there. But, I mean, it's clear to me that he's not a huge comic fan. He's not a huge Batman fan. He likes the character. But one thing that I don't feel like, Nolan was a great storyteller, but one thing he couldn't really do too well, in my opinion, was great action scenes. A lot of the action scenes in the Dark Knight trilogy kind of felt a little clunky to me. And I'm really hoping with this Batman movie, we're going to get some great action set pieces. But of course, the emphasis isn't going to be on that. It's not going to be over-reliant on the action scenes, and we're actually going to get just a really good detective story. It's a film that I'm really excited for. I can't wait for this movie. I'll be there opening weekend without a doubt. And it's like I said, it's been 8 years. 2012, the last time we had a solo Batman film. Yeah, I think that's really all my kind of views on this movie. I thought the teaser trailer, it was a very wise decision to actually put that out. I'm kind of hoping that people that do have skepticism for Pattinson, I'm hoping they'll change their mind, and upon seeing this, and I'm hoping that people aren't going to be put off going to the cinema because of Pattinson's casting. I think there's a lot of potential for this movie, and I'm hoping it does well. And I'm hoping, assuming it does well, of course, I'm hoping we do actually get that planned trilogy, which Matt Reeves, I know, wants to do. So anyway, thanks for listening. We'll be back again soon, and over and out, and speak to you soon. Take care. Okay, babe. Why?